is warning he has other alternatives to fund the border wall and end the government shutdown. Speaking to reporters this afternoon, Trump also noted that Senate leaders Mitch McConnell and Chuck Schumer are talking about ways to move forward. A bipartisan group of senators is pushing a short-term measure to reopen the government. Democrat Chris Van Hollen of Maryland said the plan would allow negotiations to continue.
It provides us this space, this breathing room, to have a very serious negotiation in good faith to resolve some critical issues. We all want to strengthen our borders, security, and make sure we have strong borders.
The State Department is ordering all of its non-emergency employees to leave Venezuela. The directive also strongly encourages American citizens who live in or are visiting Venezuela to consider leaving. The country is in the grips of a political crisis with two men claiming to be president amid violent street demonstrations in Caracas. Brian Shook, NBC News Radio.
Hi everyone, it's Yanitza Munoz from the publications Maxim, FHM, and Sports Illustrated. So being a model, I have to work out a lot. It's tough staying in shape, especially keeping my abs. Until I discovered TC1 Gel. TC1 Gel is a thermogenic gel that you rub on your waist 15 minutes before exercising. Then simply put on the TC1 sweat belt and start your workout. You'll sweat like crazy and feel the burn. It focuses on boosting circulation, increasing perspiration. It activates body heat, reduces muscle fatigue, and burns off more calories. Get your TC1 Gel now. Go to tc1gel.com and use the code RADIO30 for 30% off discount on this amazing product. tc1gel.com and get your abs back or just get in shape. Follow their Instagram at TC1Gel.
KCAA Radio is proud to announce that the Tri-City Center in Redlands is our new home. We're fortunate to be located among some of the best businesses in the region. Among our neighbors are Ray Chiropractic, Brace Connection Orthodontist, Pain Solutions Medical Massage, Rent-A-Center, MVP Staffing Agency, Jenny Craig, Salon Centric, and many more. The Tri-City Shopping Center is located just off the I-10 between Alabama and the Tennessee exits in Redlands. The Tri-City Center is the mall with the heart.
Martinez Trucking in Santa Fe Springs knows that there's no place like home. They encourage all area listeners to send the gift of home to an American soldier or unit serving overseas. All you have to do is just type military care packages into your Google search engine and click to send joy and thanks, as well as a much-needed morale boost to those who serve us every day. That patriotic reminder is courtesy of Martinez Trucking in Santa Fe Springs, where they're on the air because they care.
Talk 102.3 FM Riverside. Thank you, America, for making us radio's number one format for 8 years. Talk 102.3 FM Riverside. KCAA, the station that leaves no listener behind.
Broadcasting studios of KCAA, 1050 AM, 102.3 FM, and 106.5 FM, located in beautiful sunny California. Thanks for tuning into the Water Zone. I'm Rob Starr along with Mr. Chris Davies, and we're here to have a great time. And also, we have Miss Ingy Bisconer on tonight.
Ingy, are you there?
Yes, I am. How are you guys?
We all fine.
We not three bad.
We be good, and we want to talk about an interesting topic tonight called snow.
Yes, there was an awful lot of it in the eastern and northern Sierra last week, which happily has helped us replenish our snowpack and our reservoirs, which is where California gets a lot of its water, right?
Yep.
Well, Rob and I would like to know if you'd like to come up to the annual snowpack measurement deal, and that would be awesome, wouldn't it?
I think that would be probably the funnest day of that guy's
career.
Job here. It's a cross country ski in from that little hut east of Visalia and go measure the snowpack, and sometimes you get Jerry Brown to be on a microphone next to you with photo ops and.
Will Newsom, you think Newsom will do it?
Yeah. Do you think Gavin Newsom will do it?
I don't see why not. He seems like an outdoorsy kind of guy and concerned about our state's water, just like Governor Brown was. But yeah, those guys a couple of times a year, I guess, get to go measure the snowpack, and it's better now, which is really, really great.
Yeah. Well, if the guys from the water zone and the girl from the water zone can't get invited, we think we might self-invite.
Yeah.
Yeah. We can get on some cross country skis.
I have a snowboard I want to give away to somebody.
Oh. Well,
you know
why don't you make that as a prize for whoever can guess the next snowpack level right?
It's not a new one.
Oh,
it's slightly used.
Is it like a skateboard, but No,
it's
like
big. It's 60s? No. It's like about 5-6 feet long, and the feet portion things are. I don't snowboard, so the feet that you stick your feet into what do you call them?
Bindings.
The bindings. There you go.
Are they regular or goofy?
No, they're regular. You showed me what that was. It's regular. They're regular. They're straight, not at the angle.
Right.
Well, I'm sure there's a lot of people up at Mammoth who would like to have it. I was there last week, and it got 4 feet of snow up there on Wednesday night alone. My car looked like an igloo.
Yes, that was your car in that picture?
Yes, it was.
Wow.
A little tiny blue sliver of a license plate to show that it was a car under there. Yeah, it took a while to dig it out, but boy, the skiing and, the boarding for the other folks was just really great. And, ever since this last drought, I will never be unhappy when there's any sort of precipitation again. We need rain and water in the state of California.
Absolutely.
So always happy when it's snowing or raining here.
Chris, do you ski?
I do indeed. I snowboard as well. I do. I'm a knuckle dragger, and I like the planks.
Well, get on up there. There's no conditions better than right now.
That sounds cool. I've never done that. Never ice.
I
was born in New Jersey. Never ice skated.
Huh?
I guess I had a
sheltered life.
Sheltered life. But I know I'm not crazy because my mom had me tested.
Yes.
No, just kidding.
All right. So where are we at on the snowpack? I've seen percentages over 100%. So what's the latest data?
Yeah, I think it's something like 115%. Wow. Of average as of Tuesday, so that's really good. And most of the reservoirs, mostly in Northern California, have been more than half replenished. Now, I know there's also some technicalities about how much water is in the snowpack, and I think that's a little bit less than normal. But
moisture content, yeah.
Yeah, moisture content, but. Yeah, I mean, basically the headlines are Sierra snowpack is 4 times the size it was this time last year, so it's all good. But I do understand that we're not going to get any more snow the rest of the month.
That's right.
We have a high-pressure area over the west.
That's right.
And it's actually quite warm in the western Sierra, like the area east of Modesto and Fresno and so forth. So some of it might be melting, which is, part of our conundrum with weather change and climate change, that, our snowpack is going to melt earlier and we have to do our best to capture it and manage it. So just because we get the snow, we're not out of the woods. We need to keep it up there if possible.
Sure. Hey, Chris, you're a music buff, right?
I am.
So when they came up with this atmospheric river, is that where that song, Cry Me a River, atmospheric river?
I think so. I'm not sure that's not a Creedence song. I don't know. It could be.
I don't know. Just thinking.
They said last week that one of the biggest rivers in the world was right over California, in the sky. In the sky. It's interesting, huh? That there's rivers in the sky.
Well, that term, I'm sure it's been around for a long, long time, but to the general public, I think that's kind of rather new.
Yes, it is. Yeah,
it is for sure.
So.
Yeah.
So anything else?
But even though we got all the snow, though, we have to continue being diligent about, being prudent with our water resources, because it's not only the availability, it's all the energy it takes to move it around, to cleanse it. So we still need to be good stewards of our water.
Well, the snow's good as long as it's not yellow or brown, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that's what everybody was texting me. Don't eat yellow snow. No, it's it's great to have it. It's definitely better than being in a drought.
Sure.
But it doesn't mean that we can slack off and start wasting water.
No.
Those days are gone.
Absolutely.
The new normal is to be good with water.
Yep, got to be good stewards. Yeah.
Well,
Capturing, storing, transporting, and cleaning. That's where the real issue is.
Yep.
Yeah, because we use so much energy just moving it around,
Right.
and then we put a lot of resources into cleansing it. So it's not just whether it's there or not; it's all the other resources that go into it that we need to be careful with. So,
Right. Well, you did a great interview that's coming up here in a few seconds with a lady named Dana Gunders, and I know we're all anxious to hear our listeners to hear that. It was a very good interview, and I think we're ready. So I'll turn it over to you. So here we go.
all right. Well, Rob, our next guest is Dana Gunders with Principal. She's the principal with Next Course, and she's the woman who helped start the waste-free movement. And she has a lot of tips for us on how to prevent food waste, which also translates into preventing the waste of water, energy, and all the resources it takes to grow food.
All right, so here's the interview. Okay, so we're going to turn this show over to Miss Ingy Biscona, and she's our main host for our ACT shows. And Ingy, take it away.
Thank you, Rob. It's a pleasure to be here again on the Water Zone tonight, and which also becomes our Water Zone Ag podcast. So all of our listeners can listen to it again, or those who might have missed it can catch up on it later on iTunes. And we really have an interesting guest tonight that I'm really pleased was able to make herself available for us. She is Dana Gunders, and she is the principal with Next Course LLC. And we will be talking about the waste-free movement and the fact that, nearly 40% of the food that's produced on our farms is wasted and ends up in the landfill, an astonishing statistic. So welcome to the show, Dana. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, let me give our listening audience a little bit more about your background before we dive into chatting with you about this very interesting topic. Deemed the woman who helped start the waste-free movement by Consumer Reports, Dana helps train, inspire, and strategize around food waste reduction via her business Next Course. Previously, she founded NRDC's initiative to reduce food waste, authored the Waste-Free Kitchen Handbook, and has testified in Congress, been an expert witness, and is behind the Save the Food campaign, which is a national media campaign that has generated over $70 million in donated media to date. That's just an amazing number. Her work on food waste has been featured by John Oliver, CNN, NPR, NBC, the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, Real Simple, Cooking Light, Dr. Oz, Consumer Reports, and hundreds of other outlets. She holds both a BS and MS from Stanford University in Earth Systems and Sustainable Business Practices. So what started this was that in 2012, Dana authored a landmark report called Wasted: How America is Losing Up to 40% of its Food from Farm to Fork to Landfill. This sparked a national dialogue about reducing food waste. From there, she went on to found and lead the Natural Resource Defense Council's work on reducing food waste until early 2018 when she started Next Course. So when she's not worrying about it professionally, Dana says that she spends far too much time trying to get her small children to throw less food on the floor, which is a noble pursuit, Dana. So Dana, tell us a little bit about yourself and your journey in the waste-free movement, including your work at Fair Trade USA, which was part of your bio, and the Natural Resources Defense Council, and now Next Course.
Sure. Happy to. And again, thank you so much for having me today and for making some space to talk about this topic that I'm personally so passionate about. My journey on this topic began working in the food industry quite some time ago, and I did for a while work at Fair Trade USA more on international food issues. But when I joined the Natural Resources Defense Council, NRDC, I was really brought there to work on more domestic agriculture issues, and I worked on a sustainable agriculture project with the fruit and vegetable industry. So I was trying to look at how do we kind of create standard ways to evaluate water use, energy use, fertilizer, pesticide use, and other sustainability issues on farms. And I was put in charge of the waste group, which was mostly looking at kind of more physical waste, plastics, irrigation piping, and the other waste that comes off farms. But as part of that, I started stumbling upon these numbers that I just found astounding. 40% of food was going to waste, and something like 25% of the water in this country was being used to grow food that was never eaten, and all sorts of other enormous impacts. And I just went, wow, how is nobody talking about this? Here we are spending so much time trying to get people to, and farmers in particular, to be a little bit more efficient, 5% more efficient with their water use, 10%, and yet almost half of the food that they're actually producing is not being eaten. And it really struck me as an efficiency problem, and I became nothing less than obsessed with the topic. I really dived in quite a bit. And ultimately, that led me to write to publish a report in 2012, the one that you mentioned called Wasted. And it was all about how not just that food was being wasted, but where was it happening at each point in the supply chain, and how much, to the extent we knew, how much was happening at each point, and what could we do to fix it.
We want to dig into that.
Yeah, great. I would love to. That was August 23rd, 2012, and I like to say there must not have been much else going on in the world that day, because CNN actually put this report on their breaking news headlines.
Wow.
And and there I was with, no experience, and the next, all the other news stations grabbed it, and I found myself on NBC Nightly News the next night talking about this topic. And to be honest, it has been like drinking out of a fire hose ever since then. It's been tremendous just how much interest and attention and passion there is around trying to see less food go to waste in this country. And it's been remarkable to see how much work has increased on it ever since.
Yeah, well, it's kudos to you for recognizing it when you were assigned to a project that wasn't actually this, and then it just became the project. It is amazing that nobody's been talking about it, and it is so important. I learned about you through a YouTube video that the mayor of my city, Catherine Blakespeare, mayor of the city of Encinitas, posted on her Sunday morning newsletter, and it was called The Extraordinary Life and Times of a Strawberry, and it was surprisingly emotional. And I'd like you to, I think you're behind this YouTube video. Tell us a little bit more about that project, and then we'll dive into this entire farm-to-fork to landfill process in general.
Sure. Well, that video, and I encourage anyone to find it, any of your listeners to find it and watch it, it's just 2 minutes, was the debut of a larger campaign that we launched in cooperation with the Ad Council called Save the Food. And the campaign was really meant to not just build awareness that, wow, there really is food going to waste, but also give people really specific strategies on how they can waste less food in their own lives. But when we were doing the research and development for the campaign, we found that part of the issue is that people don't realize that they waste food. And another part of the issue is people don't really realize how much goes into growing food and getting it to their tables. And so we chose for the big debut video for that campaign to tell the story of a strawberry from seed to supermarket to someone's home. And I won't entirely spoil the ending, but it does grab everyone in a way that that really sort of, I think, enlists people, if they weren't already, in really caring about your food and realizing just how much it takes to get food to our tables, and trying to respect it a little bit more.
Yeah, I think that's the key. I mean, people may not know, or they really don't care, but I think the more they know, the more they will care. So that's why this is so important, to bring awareness and help people realize how much goes into producing food, which is a lot of what we talk about on the show, the water zone, because we're talking about agricultural irrigation and all the other resources that go into producing a crop and how we can do that better. So that's really focused on the production side, and this, of course, is focused on, hey, consumers, don't waste, all of this hard-earned food that was produced. So, in view of hunger in the world and all the resources, including water, that are required to produce food, where in your research has it been shown that the food is being wasted? I'm sure there's many touch points where this occurs.
There absolutely are, and I'll preface this and any other numbers I throw out there by saying that the data we have on this topic is very rudimentary, and it's a hard thing to get really good information on. So with that caveat, the best we can tell is that consumers, like you and I in our homes, collectively actually waste more food than any other part of the supply chain, so more than restaurants or farms or supermarkets. After consumers, the food service and restaurant industry wastes, the second most, and from there it goes farms, supermarkets, and other parts of the supply chain. So there really is great opportunity as individuals to make a difference on this issue, not only because we are the greatest source of how much food is going to waste, but also because food businesses, a lot of the waste that happens in our supermarkets, in our restaurants, is answering to consumer expectations. So the challenge, for instance, that a supermarket faces in carrying, the average supermarket carries about 50,000 different items. And they do that because we want to be able to walk in and get a pineapple, any day of the year until 9 p.m. And there's sort of an inherent challenge in carrying that type of inventory, but it's really answering to what we as consumers expect. And similarly, restaurants, there's a certain amount of spaghetti that we expect to get for $10. And they're serving large portions. They're carrying lots of menu items in order to give us choice. And it's those sorts of things that are often leading to a lot of the waste in their operations. So whether it's directly or indirectly, I do think that we kind of as individuals and collectively as society and the social norms that we have quite a bit of influence. Yeah, I mean, people basically, their behavior and the power of the dollar, the purchasing power of the dollar can change everything, as we know. So if consumers are wasting the most, that is the target, and then they in turn, when hopefully they change their behavior, can help the food service and the farms and the supermarkets do the same too. What do you think is the easiest to change? What's the low-hanging fruit to solve this problem? Is it in our own kitchens, or even though most of the waste doesn't occur in grocery stores, is that an easier place to start rather than people's behavior, which is probably the hardest thing to change? Right. Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head there. It would be great to be able to kind of flip a wand and change people's behaviors in homes. But I do think that, consumer behavior is not an easy thing to take on. And because it is more concentrated in other parts of the food system, those can be easier places to start. Food service, I think, is a good focus area, especially larger, like more institutional food service. So your schools, college cafeterias, corporate cafeterias, things like that. because they're serving such large numbers of people, they tend to have quite a bit of waste, both on people's plates, but also back in the kitchen. They're overproducing. They have an extra tray of mac and cheese or chicken parm or something that's sitting back there. And because they do have it at a certain volume, it can make it worthwhile to find a way to donate that food or, find other uses for it. That's a little bit harder when you look at smaller restaurants that just don't have quite the steady amount of surplus food happening.
Yeah.
And I will also say, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead, finish.
Well, I was just going to say, there's a few ways to look at this problem, and I like to sort of think of it as a reduce, reuse, recycle for, our plastic bottles. There's a similar kind of framework to think about it, which is that, the highest and best kind of use is to eat food and to try to not create extra food in the first place. But when we have it, the next best is to donate it or to try to share it, try to find someone to eat it. And then only after that should we be looking at things like composting or other more recycling-related solutions.
Hey, Dana, do you have a poster boy for any of this? Because I want to volunteer. Because I can tell you when the grandkids are at the house and there's leftover food, I eat it all. There's one bad part to that. I become fat after that. I try not to waste the food. And in fact, when I go to restaurants when the kids were little, and you order them food, they never finish it. So I just stopped ordering a meal for me and just eat their leftovers when they're sitting there at the table. Anyway, just joking about that. But going back to what you said with the restaurants and things and grocery stores, there's always a discussion about the use-by date and the expiration date. Because I know food stores in some states or in cities they're governed that they have to donate the food. They don't just toss them away. But how do the people know? Is there a difference between the use-by and the expiration date? And can you still eat it if it's past the date? Like I saw yogurt in my refrigerator that had an expiration date. My wife says, "It's yogurt. Don't worry about it. Just eat it." So, how does that all work and play into this?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's definitely one of the key factors that's leading to waste in homes is that people are throwing food away somewhat prematurely, and in part because they don't really understand those dates. So those dates are not meant to be about food safety, and they're not federally regulated, and they are really just a manufacturer's best guess at when a product is at its most fresh quality. So they are almost never, and I say almost, there are a few exceptions, but for the vast majority of them, they're really meant to be about when you're going to experience that product at its best. And so especially with things like yogurt and any dairy products that are pasteurized, those are safe to eat for much, much longer. And in fact, there's kind of a core misunderstanding, which is that old food makes you sick. So when you hear about people getting sick from food, it's often from E. coli, salmonella, listeria. Those are pathogens that get on the food, usually before it's gotten to you at the farm and the processing plant, and they can actually make you sick whether or not the food is old. And they're different bacteria than the bacteria that make your food decay. That's kind of a natural process that it goes through. And so it's actually gone so far that there's the president of the Institute of Food Technologists, which does a lot with food safety, said that in his 40 years there, he had never seen anyone get sick from food that's just too old.
Wow. Thank you. I appreciate that. Just now I don't worry about my wife trying to kill me.
That's just amazing. I mean, I don't think anybody knows that. I think everybody thinks that date means you've got to chuck it, and I think people do that, and that's just a huge misunderstanding in our food world.
It is a huge misunderstanding, and I think even people who ignore the dates or eat food past the dates still think the dates are telling them to throw the food out, right? Even though they're not listening. So I think there is a great misunderstanding. There are some actually bills that have been presented to Congress to try to at least standardize the way these dates are done, because if that were accomplished, then we could go out to the world with very specific meanings for the phrases that you see. And one of the challenges right now is that because there are really no federal regulations like governing the use of those dates, it's hard for me to say to you, when you see Best By, it means this, or when you see Used By, it means this, because there's no really standard ways that those phrases are used.
Yeah, and nobody really wants to stand up and shout that out because there's liability involved if you get it wrong. But I can tell you, I think most people think that they get sick from old food, and you're saying that that's just really not the case. It had a pathogen on it or not, and that's what makes you sick.
I don't know that.
Within reason, that's not. I guess a better way to say it is we are very well equipped to know when we should not eat food, right? So if something tastes bad or smells bad or is slimy and kind of turns us off, don't eat that food. That's the kind of. It wouldn't make you sick in the same way salmonella might, but it's still not necessarily a good idea to eat it. But if it looks fine, smells fine, tastes fine, and it's just past the date, then you're probably in pretty good shape. And if you have any sort of doubt with a product like, say, deli meat, then go ahead and cook it.
Yeah, okay. Well, I know that you've written. Go ahead, Rob. You had a question?
Oh, no, just real quick. I know, I don't know if they still do this, but I know years ago when I was growing up, you go to the store and you see Wonder Bread, for example. I'm just using their name as a name here. And after, the Wonder Bread guy drives around to each of the stores and he puts in what, replenishes, the Kanban to fill up the thing. But then I also saw that they take the stuff out and then they have their own outlet store, that they take what they don't sell at the big stores and bring it to the, they maybe it was sitting in the store for 2-3 weeks or 4 weeks, whatever that is number, I don't know. And then they bring it back to their stores, outside stores, and people come in and buy them like a loaf of bread, which maybe is $1.50. They'll sell it for 70 cents or something like that. I don't even know if they still have those kind of things anymore, because obviously they were doing that for a long time. Chris, have you seen anything like that?
You can still buy day-old bread and things like that even in the stores, right? It'll be discounted.
Oh.
Yeah, well,
I grew up near one of those bakery outlets too, so I know exactly what you mean. There are various businesses that are doing that in one way or another. So, out here in California, at least in Northern California where I am, there's a company called Grocery Outlet, and they buy up a lot of those extra items. Not so much the ones that are close to the end of their life, but more things that don't sell well or, that are surplus for one reason or another. And that's a huge part of what they sell, and you get a great deal by shopping there. In terms of, products that's close to the end of its life, I think the best strategy is when stores mark it down in stores. So you have that day-old bread, that day-old stuff in the bakery section. You have 50% off stickers that you'll see on products throughout a store. I think that's clearly one of the best strategies that they should be using for that product. And I don't know how much you see the product kind of coming back and then getting sold elsewhere, at an outlet. I think that probably still exists in a few places here and there.
Yeah, well, I think we're all have become more fickle consumers since what Rob was talking about, Wonder Bread, back in the day. And, people probably think, oh, that's not good. It's day old. We've become a little spoiled. So unless you're on a budget, that's probably not getting taken up very quickly. But at least it's an outlet. It's probably part of the solution as you recommend things to institutions. But before we get to that, I know that you've written extensively on on this whole range of topics, and maybe you can share some of those publications and how they might be helpful to consumers or businesses in reducing food waste.
Absolutely. Well, probably the most applicable is a book that I wrote called The Waste-Free Kitchen Handbook. And that book not only provides a bunch of strategies for wasting less food in your own life, but also has a whole reference section where you can look up 85 different products and understand which parts are edible. You know, did you know that you can actually eat the green tops of strawberries, for instance, or the stalk of broccoli and things like that. It also tells you if you have brown spots in your avocado, can you still eat it? And some of the common ways that things tend to age, is it safe, and what to do, and how you might still use the product. So that's one of my big works, and it put a lot into that. And it even goes so far as telling you, what you can and can't feed to your cat and your dog, in case you're wondering.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah. And then the other major one was the one you mentioned at the beginning, called Wasted, which we actually in 2017 put out a second edition of with more updated numbers. And that really walks through this issue at kind of the 30,000-foot level of, overall, how much food is being wasted. And actually here we haven't really spoken about some of those overarching numbers, that about $218 billion worth of food actually goes to waste. And our best estimate is that it's using approximately 20% of all of the fertilizer and water and land that go into growing food that we eat in this country. And also that food waste is actually one of the top issues around climate change. It has one of the biggest footprints. And globally, if all the food that were wasted were a country on its own, it would actually rank third in terms of its greenhouse gas footprint after the U.S. and China. And because this show's about water, I'll tell you that it would rank number one as a country. So more water goes to growing food that's never eaten than is used by any country in the world.
That is just amazing. That is just
startling.
Amazing. Well, you opened with saying that 20% of our water is being used to grow food that goes to the landfill. I mean, that alone is astounding. We know that agriculture uses a lot of water to grow our food, and you're right. That's one of the top generators of carbon and climate change issues, probably behind maybe transportation or energy. But just by not wasting so much food, we could make a huge dent on the planet. I don't know. Chris and Rob, did you know this stuff?
No.
Yeah,
I'm just astounded by listening to this.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. Well, how have people reacted to your reports, Dana? Has there been pushback because maybe people want food to be wasted so they can sell more, or is it being embraced? Or I can also imagine the opposite, that maybe some people want to, write some regulations around this to stop it.
Yeah, I have found tremendous support behind this issue from almost every angle. And I don't know if that's because, it's pretty hard to stand up and say, no, we should be wasting more food.
Yeah, everybody's going to say, yeah, you're right, yeah.
Right. So I don't know how much of it is just, it's not a good thing to be against. But there have been some regulations, but it's a pretty challenging thing to regulate. There's a congresswoman named Shelley Pingree out of Maine who a few sessions of Congress ago introduced a bill about food waste that was kind of like 27 different provisions, I think, of things that could be done. A lot of it was funding different programs, a lot of it was looking at more compost and other sort of end-of-life solutions. But I think the most forward-looking policy that's been passed to date has been in California, and that is called SB 1383, and it was actually passed as part of a short-lived climate pollutants bill. And it has a couple of rules or goals that it sets out, but they're statutory goals now. And one is that 90% of food waste will not go to the landfill by 2025, and the other is that 20% of all the edible food in the state will be recovered for human consumption. And it's that second piece that's particularly precedent-setting here in California, because there's nowhere else in the country where anyone is required to donate food. And so that law is really going to, I believe, change the face of what food donation looks like going forward.
Very interesting. Well, tell us how your company Next Course works with companies and institutions. Like, who are you working with to help tackle this problem?
Yeah, so I started Next Course a little less than a year ago, and gosh, there's been interest from all different angles, to be honest. I've worked with tech companies like Google to look at this, where do different technology products have the potential to help increase efficiency in the food system, for instance, and how can different tech companies and appliance companies play a role in helping people waste less food. I've worked with smaller food companies just to look at how can they waste less in their production, how do we design products in a way that's going to help people, once people get them home, help them use all of them. Because I believe strongly that if you buy a food product and you wind up throwing some of it out, then you're not getting the best value out of it. So I think it's really in the interest of all of our food brands to have us using their food and using all of it and having really good experiences with it. So yeah, doing everything from looking at how food is produced and packaged and trying to advise on that to more systems level stuff around, how we improve and at the policy level or at the systems level.
Yeah, well, I bet it's not a crowded space. There's probably not a lot of people that do that for people like Google. Or are you finding lots of competition there?
No, it's a pretty niche expertise I've carved out for myself here so far. So,
well, I can imagine
a lot of other people doing.
I can imagine the Google or the tech executives going, what sort of app or gadget can we create to help people solve this problem? Like having, you're going to get an alert from your refrigerator saying that your yogurt, is nearing its prime. I don't know.
Right. No, exactly. No, there's lots of people working on apps like that, and that's another thing I've been doing is advising, startups and then investors on, which ideas I think are going to really move the needle and be useful.
Very cool. Well, what
Hey, Dana.
What would you? Yeah, go ahead.
Hey, this is Chris, Dana. I'd like to ask a question because I did a little research on the website, and I thought maybe some of the listeners would like to hear sort of quantifiable numbers if you'd care to share them, or I have them right here on my screen about what the cost of that 40% of wasted food is, right? And I know that there's some research that's been done of how many billions of dollars that is, and what greenhouse gas effects are involved, and all that kind of stuff. Are you able to share some of those quantifiable numbers with us?
Yeah, sure. Around the economy, about $218 billion worth of food is going to waste. For the average household, that boils down to about $1,800 a household per year. which is real money. And if you just think about it in your own lives, I think one of the things about this is that people don't, it's really hard to see when you waste food. And we're so price sensitive when we're in the store. 10 cents might sway us one way or another, but as soon as we get home, that math goes out the window. So that $10 a pound salmon, after we cook it and don't eat a quarter of it, we don't sit there and go, oh, that was $2.50, right? But I think if you sort of think in your own life about some of the things you buy and certainly some of the higher priced items you buy, you can see that it can add up. In terms of other numbers, I can tell you that we as consumers waste about 10 times more food than someone in Southeast Asia, and about 50% more now than we did in the 1970s.
Those are just stunning numbers. I'm reading another one here that says, when you consider what it takes to grow and cool, transport, store, cook, and dispose of all that wasted food, right? You're talking about 3 times as much food as would be needed to feed about 42 million people their total diet. That's just amazing.
It is. It's just such huge volume.
Right.
It's a whole different angle on how to solve hunger, huh?
Yeah, it does, right? So you're looking at the land area the size of New Mexico, right? I mean, is the total land that's misused, that is used for wasted food. If you were to collect it all and put it all together, that's a huge amount of stuff, and as much water as Texas, Ohio, and California combined would use. I mean, when you look at it from that standpoint, it really puts a perspective on it that I think most of us can understand. Not trying to, scare anyone.
No, well, there's even more to that, wouldn't you say, Dana, or Chris, or Ingy? A lot of families that have a large family, say 4 or more, and people try to be, I don't want to use the word frugal, but conservative shoppers. They go to the market and they buy the bulk pack of stuff. There's bulk, ground turkey and vegetables and, things like that. So they buy, and then as they use or take what they need, they got to keep repackaging these things. So now you have more waste of all the material that you're doing, especially if they wrap them in the plastics and things, and that's going to hurt the ground landfills and things of that sort. So there's more to the story than just the food end of it.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, and especially in those bulk purchase settings, I think people don't think forward. You might be saving 20 cents a pound, but if you don't eat one of the 5 pounds that you bought, it may not be a good deal in the end.
Right. People aren't doing the math that quickly. They're, they want to get the bargain. They want to get the deal. And yeah, you're right. Sometimes that's going to be wasted. Well, Dana, what would you say would be like the top 5 things that we as consumers could do to reduce food waste?
Yes, so many things. A lot of them can be really easy. So first, I think it's really important to be realistic when you're at the store. Shopping is where we commit to the food, and a lot of times we're very aspirational at the store. We think about, we're going to, cook something new or eat great or feed our kids well. And then the reality hits and the week happens and we don't really follow through with that. So I think being realistic about the specific week ahead is a really key strategy, whatever that means for you. If you can plan your meals and have a shopping list, even better. That's been shown to not only save time and have people eat healthier, but also save money and lead to less food waste. So those are great on the shopping side. And then once you get that food home, I think our freezing food is a great strategy. Our freezers, in my opinion, are vastly underutilized, and we tend to think of them as like long-term storage strategy. But really, I think freezing food, particularly leftovers, for just a few days, can lead to it being used much more fully, because oftentimes we get sick of leftovers, or we don't, sort of have the time or the right meal to eat them, and they wind up going to waste. It's actually the second most wasted food in our fridge is leftovers. So freezer's a great way. And then one other is to try to create, a night of the week or periodic meals where you're really just trying to use up what you have. Best to do kind of before you go shopping. And some people call it stir fry days, but can you do a stir fry or a frittata or a taco night where you just kind of use whatever you have left and use it up, shop your fridge before you shop the store. Those are excellent.
Now that's what stews are made for, right?
That's right. That's
exactly.
Right. Do you remember the Moosewood Cookbook? I can't remember the name of the author, but she had a recipe in there that was totally what you just said. It was based on what was left in the refrigerator, and she made like a perfect protein salad, which is a fabulous salad. I love it. But it was basically used what was left in her fridge that day.
Well, when you have the big holiday meals like turkey and ham and things like that, I mean, my wife, we make turkey salad, turkey sandwiches, then she takes the bones and makes turkey soup, stuff. So, I mean, we use that. I mean, we try to, but you're right earlier, Dana. I mean, you can't keep having the same thing for a week ahead. Every day you have the same thing. So the short term freezing or cooking is a good idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's so many foods that we can freeze that people don't realize. You can freeze milk, you can freeze cheese. It's best if you shred it and then use it in cooking after. You can freeze eggs if you crack them out of their shell and scramble them but don't cook them. Bread is especially fresh bread is a great thing to freeze because it really preserves the quality. And that's the thing about the freezer is that it preserves nutrients better than our refrigerators do. So that is another great reason to really think about all the things you can freeze. I often freeze like the other half of the pasta sauce jar because I can't seem to use it up, in time. So things like that as well.
The bread seems to be the hardest. Like we'll go to the store and we'll buy. They announce, hey, our fresh baguettes are done, and or French bread, and we go buy it and we have it. We don't eat the whole thing because it's pretty big. But then when you put it back in the bag, and like the next day, it's like hard as a rock. And unless you're going to make bread pudding out of it, you try to stick it in the freezer. But then it doesn't come out the same way. It doesn't taste like that fresh, hot bread with great butter on it. And
well, then you grate it and use it for breadcrumbs.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's a good idea. That's a great idea.
Now it becomes croutons. That's what I do with it.
I like that.
Hey, Dana, I know that Inga's already asked you about what companies and institutions you work for, but in your line of work there, are there any associations or events, trade shows, summits, and stuff like that associated with your industry?
There have been occasional sort of food waste summit type of events, but more generally, I think we're starting to see that almost any conference, association event that is looking at sustainable food is often including programming about how can we, waste less for whatever industry that may be. So, and to me, that's a success because this is really an issue that needs to be integrated into the rest of a business model or operations. And so kind of segmenting it out from a business perspective doesn't really make sense. It's more about how do you find the efficiencies within your own business and within your sector.
Yeah. Well, Dana, is there anything else that you'd like to add before we sign off on this segment of the Water Zone Ag Podcast?
And where can people get a hold of you if they want to ask you questions?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, thanks. I can be found at nextcourse.co, so .co. And last thoughts, I would say, no matter how sustainably we grow our food, if we're not using it, it's a terrible use of resources. And so, finding ways, even if it takes a little more effort, to really make sure we're using our food is truly one of the lowest hanging fruit in this whole sustainability picture. So thank you so much for chatting with me about it, and I'd be happy to answer your listeners' questions. I'll just mention my website one more time, and that's www.nextcourse.co.
Yeah, and I'd say everybody who's listening and all of their friends and families ought to get this book, The Waste-Free Kitchen Handbook. It sounds like there's just a ton of wonderful tips and resources in there. And for the wonks out there, maybe read the report, Wasted, How America is Losing Up to 40% of its food from farm to fork to landfill, which is kind of what started all this. Yeah, Dana, thank you so much for the work that you do and for the education you provided us today and our listening audience. I wish you luck, and let's keep in touch. Let us know how the Water Zone can help you communicate your message even further here down the road.
Well, that sounds great, and thanks again for the talk and the opportunity to share.
You're
Thanks
welcome.
for being on the show, Dana.
Thanks a lot.
All right,
All right, back over to you, Rob.
Oh, that was pretty good. That lady sure knows her stuff about wasted
for sure.
food.
Yeah, that was awesome.
Hey, just to tell our audience, there's a show coming up in Ontario, California, for those in the local area here, on February 6th and 7th. It's the California Landscape Contractors Association, and you can get free tickets to go in and see and get exhibit hall passes. And you just go to www.clca.org/LIS. Or you can call them at 916-830-2780. So if you're a contractor, a landscaping business, go see it. There's lots of classes. Your friend Jaime Bayoni is going to be there and teach some classes in Spanish. Yeah, he's good man. Yeah. Smart man.
Great classes, too. Great teacher.
Yep. Super. And for anybody that's a homeowner or do-it-yourselfer, there's going to be experts galore. Chris, you're going to be there. Are you going to be doing that show?
Yep.
Okay, Chris will be there.
Yep, I will be there.
And so go say hi to him, and he'll give you an autograph. I think he's was it $10 now that you're charging?
Yeah, $10 a letter.
Yeah, $10 a letter. But no, he'll do it for free. Yeah. But stop by the Toro booth. That's where he's going to be.
And I have 19 middle names. So just
19 middle names. Is that the music coming up already?
Yeah.
Wow, that's. I was going to ask you about how the shutdown's hurting everybody.
Oh, yeah. Well, in its 5th week now, so, Bureau of Reclamation is the only bureau that's funded right now. So just so you know, right, Fish and Wildlife is not funded. Department of Justice is not funded, and the EPA is not funded. And last, all the Department of Agriculture guys not funded. So, boy, I hope those guys get on the ball.
And there's one other that isn't funded. Us.
We aren't. Yeah.
Us. We do this because we love it. Anyway, everybody have a great week.
Thanks for listening.
And remember, the most important thing that we tell everybody they have to do is think blue. Good night, everybody. Talk to you next week.
Good night.
KCAA Loma Linda, 1050 AM, 106.5 FM, and now 102.